Here are 11 lessons from the greatest trader of our time, Jim Simons, who consistently beat the market for over 30 years consecutively. I'm Manir, also known as Gozal Trades, and I also run Unbiased Trading. Let's get straight into this. The first lesson is to be great, you need to be obsessed. There's a particular quote from the book, which I really love, and I'll read it to you quickly, is what Jimmy liked to do more than anything else was think, often about mathematics. At the age of 3, Jimmy doubled numbers and divided them in half, figuring out all the powers up to 2, up to 1024 before becoming bored. Now, this just shows, obviously, he was incredibly intelligent at a young age, and he was incredibly obsessive at a young age. And this kind of stayed with him throughout his life. And I think this is a cool thing to success in a way. Um, I do think this in trading is a really interesting dynamic. Now, obviously, everyone that gets into trading kind of has a bit of an ego, is a bit confident. You got to be a bit delusional to think, hey, I'm just going to do this one thing and just make a ton of money really quickly. Or at least most people I've met that get into trading sort of think like that. But that gives you the confidence to get into it. And then you obviously, most of the time, the best traders do get obsessive about it. But that can cause also be the downfall. And this was particularly happening to me. Is like when you're obsessive about something, all you want to do is trade. You just want to sit at the computer, take trades, everything like that. That becomes a bad cycle where you're not actually being patient or waiting for a strategy or setups. You're just forcing trades and forcing extra size to make even more money and to make even faster progress if you put on more size. And that becomes a downward cycle where you'll actually just lose progress and you will just lose a ton of capital. And that's specifically what happened to me. And I know many other traders that have had a very similar kind of slippery slope in that essence. So it's definitely the trait that brings you into trading. And I think then you need to move that obsession into something else around trading. For me, that was an obsession about creating models, backtesting, things like that. And I'm still obsessive about that today because I don't want to be obsessive about, waiting at my computer trying to take a trade. And I think that's, focusing on the modeling side of things is a way better obsession than trying to just force executions. Failure is inevitable in our line of work. It is a crucial part of the process. Now, this is also brings me to another quote. Pretty much for every one of these, I'm going to provide one quote either around Jim Simons or from Jim Simons, and to give you extra context. So if you trade a lot, you'll only need to be right 51% of the time. You just need a smaller edge on each trade. Now, obviously, there is a caveat here where if you had more risk to reward, then you can actually lose even less. You don't need to be right only 51% of the time. But I think the thing he's illustrating here is you can be wrong a lot of times in trading and still end up right or profitable by the end of X amount of samples. So if you had a 51% win rate, that sounds pretty difficult to actually make money in. But in essence, if you had a 1-to-1, you'd still make money by the end of the year. Now, would it be the most money? Depends how much size you're using. But that's a really important part of trading that you need to be accepting and understanding that failure is going to be a crucial part to your success. Short-term trading is more about game theory than prices. Now, this is a quote I absolutely love. It was something I was never able to actually illustrate in words. And then until I heard this kind of quote from Jim Simons, this really made it click for me. So what he particularly said, especially in the book as well, was what you're really modeling is human behavior. Humans are most predictable in the times of high stress. They act intrinsically and panic. Our entire premise, human actors will react the same way humans did in the past. And this is just such a great quote saying, you want to focus on an edge at times of high stress. And when people are in high stress, that's when you're able to capitalize the most because they are most predictable in those sense of times. When we are extremely scared or extremely greedy, that's when we can become very predictable and someone can model a reaction to that and how we can trade around that. So I thought this was just a great way of saying something I think maybe a lot of us know, but I actually don't know how to say it in a good phrase. And this is definitely a phrase I'm going to hold with me for a long time trading. Alpha can come from anywhere. Now, this is a really good story about how actually one of the more adventurous investors actually saw a series of unusual pizza deliveries at the Pentagon in the midst of an international incident, and they could predict the incident happening just beforehand because of those pizza deliveries. This was actually so common that I believe the Pentagon actually had to devise a plan of how they would order food if there was a lot of people at the Pentagon at once, so it was less predictable. So this was a really interesting kind of thing, and it really just shows that alpha can come from anywhere. Now, obviously, do you think this is going to be the most repeatable or common occurrence of it? Probably not, but this really does show how you can have like different sentiments in different areas that could become an edge for your particular strategy or trade. Never be the smartest in the room. Work with the smartest people who can, hopefully smarter than you. Be persistent and don't give up easily. Really simple line. I think just incredibly hard to execute. Not being the smartest in the room, I think a lot of people are happy to say that. But when you're actually not the smartest in the room and you have no idea what someone's talking about and you're having to ask tons of questions and, really be vulnerable in sense that you have no idea what they really are doing. I think that's way harder to actually do than what most people think. At least when they say, "Oh, I'm fine being the smartest in the room." At least for me, this is something I've had to train myself with, and I've always had a good acceptance of if someone's further ahead than me. I just listen to what they say, and then I'll funnel that information and see what is true and what is not true by just taking that action on whatever advice or things they've said through that kind of time of me learning with them. This has normally been the best route for me. I will say that, a really important thing with advice, especially when people are saying it from ahead of you, is context. Is that advice applicable to your particular scenario? Now, this can be a dangerous thing because if you constantly think, "Oh, that's not applicable to me because of this reason or this reason," then you'll never actually take any action and take any progress or skip any mistakes because of that advice, because you're putting up those barriers of, "Hey, that's not applicable to me." But you do need to be aware enough that potentially this happened because of this reason and it's not fully related to how you would actually execute it today. So most of the time I try and take advice and then see if it's straight applicable. Otherwise, I will do a small modification of it, for example, and see if that kind of works. I know that was a bit of a difficult way of saying that. I just don't have a clear example to present you, but hopefully that understands. If you don't, feel free to reach out and I'll try and explain it in a better way. Surviving long enough is one of the keys to long-term success. This is another quote from Jim Simons where all he says is persistence and discipline are key traits for long-term success in any field. And I think some of the best wisdom is wisdom that is incredibly simple and where we overcomplicate it. A lot of people think there's so many different things that go into trading, and don't get me wrong, I feel like there are, but in essence, if you are just persistent and you have discipline over a long enough time, you probably will see some success in trading. And I think this applies to any field, as Jim Simons is saying, like persistence and discipline and keeping at it even when it seems kind of hopeless, I think is really important. Now, I do always think about this when I hear these kind of quotes of a sentence by Lance. He's the one Lance B on Twitter. He was a prop firm trader at Trillium, and he does talk about the idea that sometimes this isn't for you, and you need to be able to hang up the kind of coat when you recognize this isn't for you. Now, that's a very difficult thing to do when you are, going on these quotes with persistence and discipline are, key. So I definitely think it's a balance, like everything in life. With overfitting, you don't want to underfit, you don't want to overfit. It's a balance. So that balance is the hard part of that. But I have always seen that persistence and discipline in something has probably caused me the most success over time, even if I haven't seen it straight away. And most of the time, you don't see it for at least a year, 2 years until you really start seeing some progress. It is really like that exponential curve. A lot of the time, you're getting over a lot of ignorance bias, and then after that time, you're actually making key strides and quickly making more progress. Don't aim for perfection. It is often a compromise. Everything is, to some extent, a compromise. Not everything can be perfect. This is really important in strategy development. A lot of people are looking for the perfect strategy, very minimal drawdown, perfect return on capital, just everything is looking great, and that's the strategy you're going to use. I can almost promise you, obviously do your own due diligence, but from all of my testing and working with tons of different traders, that just never is the case. You will get some standout strategies that do maybe perform amazingly well, but normally the caveat with those strategies is they are very short time window when they actually work well. Like, for example, the Pentagon Pizza one, I'm just saying because it's on recent minds, that's a really good edge, and you could be pretty much almost 100% correct on that, give or take. Obviously, I've not seen the stats on it, but you could probably be 100% correct on that. But once that edge is discovered, that's going to zero. Like, the Pentagon implemented different systems, and you can no longer do that in the same way. So there's no way a really high predicting power can stay consistent for that long. And then, more of the mediocre signals from what I found do maybe stay consistent for a longer period of time, but you are sacrificing some return or some volatility. So in essence, everything is a compromise. You either maybe look for that strategy that's not really good for a short period of time, and then you have to find a whole new one, or you find like a mediocre one, create a portfolio of those kind of strategies, and then you have a decent return over that X amount of time, but it's just not perfect. And I think this is just so important to understand, because when we get into trading, we all look for perfection. We look for the perfect strategy you want, and that's just not possible. You utilize data to substantiate your choices, not just your instincts. The best decisions are often made with data and evidence, not gut feelings. This is incredibly important, especially from my background with trading. Now, don't get me wrong, there are going to be some traders that are incredibly gifted at being a discretionary trader. Even someone like Stephen Cohen, which, he went into an arbitrary options arbitrage desk, and he was pretty good at understanding probabilities, uncertainties. He was also an incredibly good discretionary trader, at least from what people have said about him. And that is, you will get some gifted people like that are just really good at reading markets. I don't think that is the most common way to get good at trading. I do think, using data, and I think even those discretionary people or discretionary traders, once they utilize data, they become even better, at least in my opinion. I've definitely found this for me that like discretionary trading, I made very little amount of progress over about a year and a half. And then once I started to really utilize data, the progress was exponential kind of from there. And this is pointed with so many other people that have mentioned this as well, that the best decisions are based on data and evidence. You don't make a decision only based on gut feeling unless it is impossible to model. And then maybe, you do have to use gut feeling of how you've interacted with that particular scenario before, historically, when you're trading or, anything in life, really. So do try when possible to find that data, find that evidence to help back up your decisions. And that's only going to increase your conviction and make your execution even better. Energy into what you can control for the quickest progress. The key is to focus on things that are under your control and make a difference. Don't get distracted by things you can't change. This is really applicable to trading in the way that some data points or some things that do happen in trading, you actually have no control over. You have no control over the next trade, how it's going to do. You have no control over some data points like float, for example, that are just historically very hard to backtest over because the data on them is very inaccurate. There's, other data points as well that can be very difficult to quantify or even just find historical data on. And those are those things that I've found the best approach to is normally just leaving them and not actually modeling over them and just being aware that they maybe could change some of the odds. But, focusing on the core strategy and the core variables that actually do create the performance is what's most important. In a quick roundup of this, just funneling the energy into what things you can actually control, measure, and actually take action on compared to all the different things in trading that you have no control over at all. And that, that will simply just pass by you trading. What Jim Simons has looked for when he's hiring people, he wants a guy who knows enough math so that he can use tools effectively, but has a curiosity about how things work and enough information and tenacity to try it out. This is such a good way for describing what I think the ideal trader or ideal person should be. Maybe with the maths ones, you don't need to know that much maths, to be honest. However, the curiosity, the imagination, and tenacity are incredibly important. If you do not have curiosity in trading, I think there's another quote that, curiosity is the biggest edge in trading. You need to be willing to discover new edges, new things that could affect a strategy, new ways you could look at something, new techniques. Curiosity is so important, especially in the world of using data in trading as well. Tenacity to actually be able to implement it, take action on it. Don't be scared of, implementing some capital onto it, and imagination for the parts where there isn't a perfect solution. I really loved, there was someone hiring for a quant developer, I think it was a couple of months ago. And the key thing he put in, what he was hiring for is he was not looking for someone that was perfect at solving problems that could be solved. And I guess what that just generally means is you don't want someone necessarily, obviously I don't have as much experience hiring quant developers. I do have a couple, but it's not for the people that you're looking that want a perfect answer. No one is going to be able to fully model the market and be able to have 100% return every single day, all the time. You need someone to have a bit of imagination of how they can solve problems that can't fully be solved. And you need to come up with the best outcome possible for that particular solution. Now, obviously, this is just from my current experience. And obviously, I'm quoting heavily from that kind of a couple of quant hires I saw online from different quant firms. But I just thought that's a really interesting perspective, and at least it seems very true from what my experience. Luck plays a role in your journey, but you can increase your luck. Luck plays a role in success no matter how hard you try. But the harder you work and the more you prepare, the luckier you get. And this is a really simple quote. I think there's even actually a better one around it, how there's like 3 or 4 types of luck by Naval. And that's basically the same essence here, that the harder you try, the luckier you will get over time, because you're putting in more reps, you're putting in more opportunities that could come out of whatever action you've taken. So really quick roundup, and kind of the final one here is just make sure you put in enough effort so that luck can reward you in different ways over your journey and be consistent over that time. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy, please like it and share it with anyone who might be interested.